Let's come on back in. Those who are out in the lobby, please bring them in. Hey, Larry Clausen. Come on, guys. Come on back in. Let's get going again. I've requested they increase the temperature in here a little warmer. I'm freezing too, just like you are. Come on, guys. Come in and sit down. Tom, Cook, come sit down, please. Jimmy, you ready? Sandy Thompson had to, well, I guess he's flying today, he's leaving this afternoon. He's very concerned about COVID and that sort of thing, and age and all that sort of thing, just like the rest of us. But he's more concerned, so he'll be leaving here this afternoon. So Jimmy and
Richard Schmidt
and Richard, there he is. Richard are going to do the Marsh Brothers presentation. Jimmy.
What we're going to talk about is the new cross shaft bearings that Sandy's designed. They're polymer. So new pillow blocks and cross shafts. My airplane, I've got them in for about a year now. I still had the stock cross shafts. Mine were pretty straight, so they were pretty easy to do. Richard has them in his airplane. He's got the upgraded cross shafts. The upgraded cross shafts, you can change the stub end. But before Sandy developed the boring tool, Richard put him in his airplane, and he did a lot of work to make them work, between shimming them.
To get the angle.
Ken, you want to pass these around?
Go
ahead, stand in front of the mic and let me pass these out real quick.
When I did it, he didn't have the tool to actually get the whole board at the correct angle for the cross shaft. So I had to kind of just fiddle around with it and get it.
Machine it yourself?
Yeah, kind of self-machine it. And it works. I mean, it's been there. I've had it for about a year now, and every time I, take the bottom cowling off, I always tweak on the shaft, and there's no play whatsoever in it. It's at least 100 hours now on it. About 100 hours or so on that, yeah. But as Jimmy says, the tool that Sandy came up with now makes it a lot easier.
Go ahead.
Makes it a lot easier to actually locate the hole and get the hole in the right angle to fit where the cross shaft is.
See, I was lucky enough with my airplane. My airplane has stock cross shafts in it. So the ends were wearing, but they're not replaceable like the upgraded shafts are. So what Sandy did was he made me some collars or some sleeves that I glued over the top of the end of my cross shaft. So it brings it up to 5/16, and I got to use the polymer bearing with the 5/16 hole. Now mine were pretty straight, so mine were pretty easy to put in, but every airplane's a little different. Some of them are angled, some of them are not. But if you have the upgraded cross shafts, you can use Sandy's boring tool, and it really works well to get that down. With my airplane, when we took the pillow blocks out, we ended up having to shim one of them with an angled shim to get the angle right. But also, one of my famous saying is nobody's perfect. Everybody says they're perfect, but nobody's perfect. And we put the pillow blocks of my airplane backwards. So they were probably in backwards to start with, and the mechanic just took them out, put them back in. So I spit one of the bearings out. But after a year and a half, I guess I've had them in with, I don't know, maybe 100 hours, 75 hours, something like that. We took them all apart to turn the pillow blocks around and change the one bearing. There's no wear, including the sleeves that we put over the top of the shaft. So it's kind of nice what we did, or what Sandy's done. It's really helped my airplane anyhow with stock shafts. I'm not sure, none of this is certified yet either. We put it in the airplane for a test bed. Nothing has changed because we changed pillow blocks, and I still got the old ones, so if I have to, I can always go backwards. Richard, the same thing. He put him in his airplane as a test bed. So it's going through certification now, but they're not certified yet. So just so everybody knows, you don't want to just put the stuff in your airplane that's not certified. It's in my airplane and Richard's airplane as test beds, and Sandy's airplane as well. I have all Sandy stuff in my airplane with the exception of the throttle knobs. I got Joel's throttle knobs. So I got black, blue, and red rather than black all the way across. He made them a little nicer out of aluminum, but that's off the subject. I'm not sure what this presentation's about because I haven't seen it yet. But I guess this is.
So we're gonna wing it.
Yeah, we're winging it because I didn't know Sandy wasn't doing this, and then he asked me, and I said, "Yeah, I'd be more than happy to." But I guess this is the upgraded cross shafts are down the bottom with part numbers from Aerostar, and then Sandy's bearing blocks and bearings. He changes the pillow block as well. So if you buy the stuff from Sandy after he gets certified, it's going to come with a pillow block, a bearing that's got no hole in it. So you have to figure out if you have the upgraded cross shafts. With his boring tool, it's very easy to get the angles correct.
Jimmy?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. You can't hear. I didn't mean that. But like I said, with the upgraded cross shafts and Sandy's boring tool, it makes it very easy to get the angle correct. I was fortunate with mine. Mine are almost straight, so it worked out pretty well in mine. This is just a picture of, I guess, where everything is. And I'm sure most people know where the cross shaft goes. You can change the cross shaft without taking too much apart. It's not an easy job, but it's doable. So if you want to upgrade cross shafts as you're doing this, you can buy the cross shafts from Jim Christie with the stub ends in it. And then you just take the stub end out, use Sandy's tool to bore the bearings the way you want them bored, and then put it all back together. Pictures of the old bearing blocks. And then I guess the new bearing block is there as well. And then you see this is a stock cross shaft that they're showing here. And that's what I had. I have still, but mine was worn like that. Sandy made me a sleeve, and I glued the sleeve with JB weld over the top of the worn part. And now I have 5/16 shafts. Same pictures of the same stuff. You can see the worn shaft a little better. It's circled. Pillow blocks. Like I said, if you do buy the stuff after you get certified from Sandy, it'll come with a new pillow block. He's talking here about just when you know you got worn shafts or worn shafts, worn pillow blocks, worn rod ends. It could be a million things, stuck wastegates, but it shows up in manifold pressure. So as you're pushing the throttles up, sometimes the manifold pressure will stick going up and all of a sudden it'll pop back up. Same thing on descent. When you're coming down, you get the ram air effect and you see the manifold pressure building up, and then you pull the throttle back to match it, and then all of a sudden the manifold pressure goes down. Could be worn parts, could be stuck wastegates, could be a lot of things. I guess this is Sandy's design when he first did it, and we're talking about the pillow blocks bored on an angle. If you see the bottom of the picture, the cross shaft is coming through on an angle. Every airplane is different. My airplane, like I said, I was very fortunate. I got to use the stock cross shafts again, and mine were fairly straight. What we did do on one of them was we had to make a little tapered shim to get the pillow block to angle the way we needed it. Sandy's pretty good at drawing pictures. Okay, so even with the stock cross shafts, I have the bigger diameter. I have the 5/16 rather than 1/4 inch. But with the bigger cross shafts, you have the removable ends, and I passed some around with his tool and also a worn end. Because we found, even with the upgraded cross shafts and the steel bearing, and Ken's got a fix for it, he puts a spring on the rod end for the wastegate. Because what happens is the pulse from every time you get an exhaust pulse, it's pushing that wastegate. So you can't see it, you can't feel it, but it's actually fluttering. And that cross shaft is trying to bounce, and that's what causes the wear on the bearings and on the cross shaft ends itself. It says he's using the larger hemispherical bearing, so that's the 5/16 bearing. So whether it's a steel bearing with the upgraded shafts or his polymer bearing once they become approved. In 2018 is when Sandy did the conversion on his airplane. 2019, 2019, manifold pressure. So he's talking about the same thing here. He was having the issues with manifold pressure moving, whether it be in an ascent or a descent. I've even seen it in cruise flight. You'll see a manifold pressure starting to fall, waffle around a little bit without touching anything, and that's usually worn parts. So this is one section of it that should not wear anymore. Richards, you said you got about 100 hours on yours, and he doesn't see any wear. I got somewhere between 75 and 100 hours on mine, except for the mistake that we made, we haven't seen anywhere. More pictures of his stuff. There's the sleeves that I put on my cross shafts. And all I did was glue them on with JB Weld, and they've held up well. But we did install the pillow blocks backwards, so it spit one of the bearings out. So there's the bearings. There's a blank. There's one with a hole in it for you can put the shaft through, and Sandy's boring tool. And there's a straight bearing on the bottom. But the polymer bearings and the sleeves, I've got nowhere yet. This is a picture of where it's inside the airplane. If anybody doesn't know the cross shaft, we got 2 turbochargers, 2 wastegates, and a cross shaft that hooks them up with one actuator. The actuator is on one side, and then you set up the wastegates as per Aerostar Aircraft's drawings. But you can see where the cross shaft is coming through the pillow block. Rather than a steel bearing, we got the black polymer bearings. There's a long and short on my airplane has a long and short pillow block itself. Some airplanes have 2 long, some airplanes have 2 shorts, some airplanes are on angles, some airplanes are straight. They're all a little different. I think Sandy called you up, Ken, didn't he, about the pillow blocks? And you said you had 2 long ones or 2 short ones? Long and a short. And I have a long and a short on mine. Richard, yours? Yeah. Long and a short. But some of them have 2 longs or 2 shorts. So it's right now, like I said, it's all experimental, and his tooling is experimental until it gets certified.
I wonder if replacing the rod bearings also with the same polymer material, because that would probably really prevent, the wearing from the.
Sandy being here, it's kind of hard to say if that's one of the things on their agenda or not. He's got a lot of things on the agenda. He's got a lot of things in the works, but that doesn't mean. Ken, you got a question? No. Okay. He's talking about the overall condition of the shaft ends. With the upgraded shafts, like I said, the ends are changeable. With the stock shafts that I have, they're not changeable, but he did make that sleeve for me, and he shows the sleeve in the other picture. Pre-bonding and cleaning, there's basically, once you install the polymer bearings, we don't use mouse milk on them anymore. But they self-lubricate, so there's nothing that we have to do to them. We just got to make sure they stay fairly clean.
You have dirt, crud, sand, mouse milk all washed all over that. Does that score or deteriorate the bearing?
Well, where the pillow blocks are, unless you really go up there and squirt at them with the mouse milk or there's no Zerks on the pillow blocks. So when you change the pillow block, you're going to put something clean in there anyhow. So I know the upper wastegate rod end, you got to squirt that, and it's kind of close to it, but you just stay away from it. It's not a big deal. Again, these are stock cross shafts. They got a threaded end on them so you can put a nut so you can't, when you install the pillow blocks backwards like I did, it shouldn't spit the bearing out. But I think one of my ends wasn't threaded, the one that is spit out. But you can see where the wear is, and the wear is just from the steel bearing. Because, like I said, it's a pulse. So if it doesn't, even over the years, it'll wear the bearings, but it wears the shafts as well. And it does the same thing with the upgraded shafts, with the 5/16. It's a bigger bearing, a bigger shaft end, but it'll still wear the shafts. But at least they're changeable. Once we put the polymer in so far, we haven't seen any wear. That looks like about the end of his presentation. But I kind of wish Sandy was here to answer some of the other questions for what he has in the tunnel for coming down.
1990, Thornton Bearings developed a self-lubricating bearing option for the turbocharged aerostats to replace the factory spherical metal bearings that support the cross shaft. The metal bearings were being hammered out of shape by the vibration that is inherent in a turbo wastegate system. The environmental heat precludes effective lubrication with grease or oil, so you are stuck with a joint that is eventually going to hammer itself to death. That then affects the whole linkage and makes setting stable manifold pressure a chore. The maker developed a solution involving a thicker trunnion, a heavier cross shaft, and replaceable cross shaft journals. I bought 2 of these assemblies, fitted them to my airplane, and we watched the performance. The replaceable rod ends are a great idea, as are the thicker trunnions, but the basic problem with the bearing wear is still with us. Our parent company developed a high-temperature polymer called HDP that was produced mainly for pump bearings, but I thought, let's give it a try. And it works. After hundreds of test cycles, we're seeing no wear on either the cross shaft stub end or the bearings.
So this is the little kit that we provide you with. We make the trunnion in aluminum. We anodize it. This is exactly the same trunnion as the later model trunnion supplied by the OEM, with the same inside diameter, same bolt pattern, same thickness, and the same height. Some of these are long, some of them are short, some of them stick up, some of them go down. You have to decide what you've got. Anyway, the bushing is already pre-drilled, so it will accept a smaller diameter pilot shaft. So we screw this one into the cross shaft, and then we put a washer on here, which is a buffer. And then we put the trunnion on. And then we have a special little cutter here we make from a stainless steel bolt. Goes on here. So now you bolt the trunnion into position, and the angle is whatever it is. And you tighten the nut against the cutter and start to turn the cutter. Turn the cutter with a wrench, tighten the nut. Turn the cutter some more, eventually it works its way in until it cuts right through and into the backup washer. Once you're through, you're done. Remove it, remove the cutter, and screw in the standard cross shaft. Stub, which we also make, a stub shaft, has a little screw, slot in the end for a flat screwdriver. Screw it in with the lock nut on it, put the trunnion in place, screw it on, and you're done. That's all you ever have to do. Never have to lubricate it, never no advantage to it. Should last a long, long time. I think this is about the last Aerostar product we can make, because I don't know what else we can do on the airplane.
I think that just answered the question, Richard. Does anybody have any questions about the polymer bearing and the cross shafts? It's so far, like I said, I've had it in my airplane for, I don't know, a year and a half, I guess. And besides us installing the pillow blocks backwards, I have not seen anywhere. My cross shafts were worn. The sleeves, we glued the sleeves on and have had no issues since we've done that. Now, I'm not saying in 10 years down the road we might not see a little wear, but right now we're not seeing any wear. Richard's got about 100 hours on his so far, and I don't know how many hours Sandy has on his, but none of us has shown any wear yet. Is there any other, no questions?
I don't see Jim Christie here, we never did, but what is his fix? And how does that compare with-
Well, Jim Christie's fix is the upgraded shafts with the stub ends that you can change, but they're still showing wear. When I spoke to Jim about this morning, he said this is one of the few things that he really likes that Sandy did. Now, he's not here to defend himself, but that's what he told me.
So Jimmy, when are those going to be available?
I'm not sure about the STC process with Sandy. I know he has a guy on staff that just works STCs, so I'm not sure when it's going to be certified yet.
It will be certified in Canada first.
Yeah, once it gets certified in Canada, the FAA kind of signs off on it.
Jimmy, could you review what you see in a normal metal as it starts to wear?
Well, like I said, the manifold pressure kind of floats around a little bit. Anytime you get looseness in the wastegate actuator system, whether it be rod ends or pillow block bearings or sticky wastegates, every oil change you're supposed to go through all that and look at it all and lubricate wastegates. But the biggest problem that I see, if your wastegates are good and you start getting some wearing parts, you'll see the manifold pressure start floating around a little bit. It just doesn't stay steady.
Just drift half an inch up and down, or a couple of
Yeah, an inch, half inch, depending on how bad the stuff's worn out. And then,
stable manifold pressure, and you've got to tighten that system.
yeah, no, if it's stable, you got nothing to worry about. But the only thing about, like I said, with the polymer bearings rather than the steel bearings, we're not showing any wear. So it's just one less thing we have to worry about if it continues to show that way. Any other questions?
When you're seeing it, some of the variability with manifold pressure, is that happening over, let's say, just a few seconds or over minutes or rapidly?
And the problem with that is, it's usually very slow when you watch it, but the problem is it could be a lot of things. It might not just be worn parts. It could be controllers. It could be a lot of things. But the pillow block bearings, once they wear out, they can start, you can see the variation when you're in cruise.
How many hours did the rod ends last?
I'm sorry, George?
How many hours did the rod ends last in service?
I'm not really sure 100% on the stub rod ends with the steel bearings, but I'd probably say 100, 150 hours before you start seeing anything. If Jim was here, he could probably answer that better. Richard, do you know how long yours lasted?
I changed mine out at about 400 hours.
About 400 hours. And how bad were the rod ends worn
They weren't too bad. They were enough
to want to change
to
them?
do something about it.
Okay, Richard said he got 400 hours out of his. I'm not sure how long Sandy had his in, because I'm passing one around that's worn that came out of Sandy's airplane. But I'm not sure how many hours are on it.
Any more questions?
Nice paint job.
And Sandy still works on his own airplane. He likes to draw pictures too. And I think that's the end of his presentation. If anybody's got any questions, wants to grab me later, I'm more than happy to answer anything I can.
Thanks, Jimmy. Good leadership.
I'll take that back, and I'll take whenever they're done passing the other stuff around.
David, you ready? Okay. Now we're going to talk about avionics. David Momquist is a recent, within the last year, Aerostar owner. They fly a 601P. There's 3 pilots flying it. And he's done quite a bit of avionics work, including George Barnes' airplane. Excuse me. I got an S on there for slick. George is our international pilot. He's from Australia. He's supposed to be farming in Australia, but he's up here playing with us. Got a memory stick?
Yeah.
Okay. Just getting that slot right there, if you can. I'm sorry I made it that way.
It's all right. Oh, I can't. There it is.
There it goes.
We'll see how that works.
Okay, and there's a light pin right here.
All right. Boy, what a treat, right? I mean, you get here, you get all this great information from Jimmy's and Jimmy, and it's been very informative. I enjoyed it. In fact, I didn't even want to go to the bathroom. I had to. So I've got a shop a couple hangers down from Ken, and I didn't really know much about Aerostars. We just did Avionics. We got a repair station, a certified repair station. And we do a lot of ground support equipment also for the airlines. So we do a little bit of everything, and or avionics wise. So an airplane ended up in my hangar that I was storing for Kenny, it was there now for like 5-6 months. Long story short, the guy kind of wanted to sell it, didn't want to sell it. I've got a couple partners, Bob and Dave, and we lost the 310. Another partner geared it up, so we're short a travel airplane. And Bob thought, hey, this could be a good deal. Anyways, we ended up buying it, and we've had it about 2 years. And it takes about 3 years, at least for me, to get an airplane the way you want it. You always find we got hydraulics leaks here, we got this here. It takes a while. We got it. It had a 530 and a 430 non-WAS. We put in the Bendix King or the Avidynes, and we like those. You got to get used to them. And we also put in a GI 275. So I'll get to that in a second. I'm looking for, there it is. Not sure if this will work. So, okay, that's good. So most people know what a GI 275 is, right? What is it?
You're not up there for some
Oh,
reason.
it's not up there.
So
Garmin came out with a nice, what the G5 is, a little small indicator that's glass that has all the information. The GI 275 is the same. It's just nicer, clearer touch screen. And one of the good things about the GI 275 is it can emulate a lot of different autopilots. And one of the ones it can emulate, I'll pass this around. This is a GI 275, and it tells you all the autopilots and what portion it can emulate, like if it does the gyro or the HSI or not. And depending on which autopilot you got, you can show it. Got a picture of the people who got copies. So we got the Avidynes. This one. Better. So we have a Century 4 in our 601P, and you have the gyro. There you go. The HSI.
all right.
And the ADI. So on that piece of paper I'm sending around, Garmin made the GI 275 to emulate the gyros in the Century 4, but only for the HSI, so only for the bottom one. And the top one is the ADI. Yeah. And it does not emulate the Century 4, and I don't think it ever will. But I saw somebody else here, his name is David. He had 2 GI 275s in his airplane, and he has what autopilot? KFC 200, and probably on that sheet, you'll see it'll emulate the gyro and the HSI. And that's one of the main issues about autopilots, right? The old mechanical gyro. So if you can emulate that, that's great.
I don't know how to change the screen. Huh.
That's all right. We'll make it work.
Okay.
So something you got to remember, if you got an old autopilot or old equipment, older, and you put in new, it talks to it, but it's not all really clear as far as operating it as a pilot. Because like on this situation for our Century 4, it does all the, this one's in map mode, but it's an HSI also. And it does all the left and right and everything. But it's just kind of dumb to the autopilot. The autopilot Century 4 only knows left, right, up, down. So it's all coming off of this, which is kind of nice. So whatever you're displaying here, which is on this, it's either GPS or VOR, ILS, and it's going to the autopilot. So if you change this to the VOR, the autopilot doesn't know it. It turns, and the autopilot just turns without you recognizing it. So it's just something you got to keep in mind whenever you put in new stuff with old stuff. It talks, but it's not as smooth as like, hey, we had a Garmin autopilot or Garmin. So these are nice. We install a lot of them. They're touch screens and also push the buttons. So it's pretty nice. You can see the airspeed, altimeter, altitude select, and this is in map mode. We don't use map mode so much because we have a bigger screen, but some people like it. So just wanted to mention that on the GI-275s because there's a lot of options for a lot of people, depending on your the autopilot that you have and the instruments you have. Let's see. And one thing, unlike the G5s, you can put this one, and all your other instruments can go away. You don't have to have a backup altimeter, backup airspeed, or even this or this, because this has a battery, this dies, this becomes your ADI, and it's all backup. You can clean up your panel. This is a GI-275 also, but you can program it for engine monitor and different things. Hopefully I won't mess this up too much here. Let's just take a look. So there's so many things. This is a picture of actually George's airplanes, and it's a Bendix King 235, and it's certified for the Aerostar as a replacement for KFC 150 or 200. The good thing about that is you don't have to change the servos. You just take out the old one, you put in a digital autopilot. It's called AeroCruise 230. The bad part about it right now, it's only good for the 700 feet. And I've talked to Bendix King, we're a dealer. I don't know if they're going to get it for 601s that have a KFC 200 or not. But it is, let's see if we got a...
So they ended up certifying it for less than 25 airplanes.
Yeah, right, and so...
That's brilliant, brilliant.
Was I told them every 2 weeks for 6 months?
Yeah.
Everybody should, with a KFC 200, you should be calling.
So here's a picture of George's, and here's what I would suggest if you guys put in new autopilots that George really wanted. You can see way up top in the center, that's his touchscreen autopilot. If you're going to put a new autopilot in, they're down here. Some of you guys may be airline pilots, almost all the airline Part 25 big airplanes, the autopilot's up here. And so we moved his up there, and it's just easier to see. You don't have to look down. My Century 4 is way slow, and there's no indication when it disconnects, right? So you're wondering why are we going a different direction? So that's just giving you ideas if you do different panels, something to keep in mind. Here's a better picture. You can see, I got this on. Autopilot right here. Of course, 750, 650, and that's a 600s, 500 TXIs, and then a G5 backup. And we did a couple modifications. We took, since he doesn't need a vacuum anymore, we took that vacuum gauge or the pressure gauge and moved it over here close to where his boots are. And then we took, he's got the trim here. We put it down there and put his flap control. You can't see it, indication up there by the flap. So there's a lot of different things you can do while it's apart. Here is, I don't know if this is going to work. I'm taking a chance here. So this is a little video showing you this plan. So what it's showing us is he's coming up on weather, and he's got several different displays. So he has a radar, which is nice. And then he has lightning on this, ADS-B lightning. And then when you put all this stuff together, then he has his ADS-B next rad coming on the 750, and then you can play it back. So the new stuff, safety, right? It really helps him flying. He's got so much information, and it's kind of displayed in different areas. So that's different options you can look for whenever you're getting updating your avionics. Yeah, it's a nice setup. One thing also you want to keep in mind is, and I don't know if you noticed this, David, on my Bendix Skinner Avidyne, the ADS-B weather looks way worse than it does on my iPad. And there's a lot more red. And the only thing, the best way to do it is to practice, right? Practice. I won't be sorry, but like George's video here, is I can see it during the day, hey, this is red, but it's really kind of yellow. So there's a difference on manufacturers on how bad they make their weather look. And so the Avidyne, there's no adjustment to it. It just there's more red than there is on the iPad. So it looks a lot worse. And then don't forget, you got to look at how old your information is on the bottom left or wherever it is on the screen, how old the iPad is. All right.
Hey, Dave,
Yeah.
you will use the microphone at the lectern, and the people that are remote can hear you. That doesn't transmit over the internet.
Oh, I got you.
Thank you.
Sure. So I've talked to a couple people. Whenever you put in all glass, you have a pneumatic issue because you don't have pneumatic gauges anymore, but you still have boots. So your pneumatic information is coming up. So you got to make a little vent to go overboard and then adjust your vacuum. So at least you can see you have pressure. So at least you can see you have pressure so that you can know your boots are going to work, right? So there's all these little things when you make modifications, things you have to do, things you don't have to do. A lot of options when it comes. Let's see, what else do I have?
That's very important for everybody to realize that if you're going to go to this new electronics and do away with your pneumatic system, or not maybe do away with it, but to lessen the load on it, you've got to simulate the load through some kind of an orifice fitting and adjustment of the pressure regulator.
Yep. Yeah.
Very important.
Yeah. So
It goes through pumps like candy.
David had the same issue, and they came up with finally got a solution. So there's just things like that. Talk to your shop. Ken's a great look. I call him when I said, "Where's this relay at?" And he usually puts me in the right direction. Here's a picture of the old panel. Those are always cool to see, right? He had a 750, but here's where his old autopilot was, and we moved it where his audio panel was, and then he has a remote audio panel. And there's a lot of, and so that's what the airplane looks like when it's being torn apart. We have a dummy. We made these those are panels, not the original, not the final ones, but we made those so we could do a mock-up and set it up. I think he likes his Bendix King KFC 235, and it has a lot of, there's a magnetometer in the wing, and it has a lot of good features. And that's a 500 TXI with the engine monitor. And so engine shown there, the boxes, right? You take all your wiring off the engine, you put it in a small box, and we put ours in a wing root, and then we send up a little bit of data wire up to the cockpit. They crosstalk, a lot of backup systems, works good. Let's see, I've got, there's a, no, that may not work. So here's a picture, it's an Avidyne in our 601P doing a GPS steering. So on ours, unlike if you have a whole complete package, the GI-275s emulate GPSS, but it's on heading mode. So you're on your Century 4, you're in heading mode, but it's going to fly that racetrack or the procedure turn quite well, as long as your Century 4 tweaked in. But you're in heading mode, and then when you come around, right, now you have to hit approach mode. So there's, it's not automatic like it is if you had a GFC 500, 600, or KFC 235. But that's, actually it works quite well though. And at least in my experience, on this, and I've talked to people with Garmin, the guy gives me an approach, I load the approach, he says he's giving me vectors, I'm gonna load the whole approach because it's happened before. They changed the vectors to give me one of the fixes to go to, and if I had vectors, it may not show up on my Avidyne. I load the full approach, then I can just scroll right down here. It's kind of pick my direct to, and then can continue on my approach. It's rather, otherwise you have to, at least I did, have to reload it, and it becomes a little bit of a hassle. But those are just little tricks as you fly your airplanes. You get to learn them. What else? With the new stuff, you get altitude alerts, and you get, I know on my Century 4, I only have an HSI. I don't have an altitude alert. You get busy, says descend to 4,000. And unless I had an ADI with the altitude alert, it's easy. You might want to add something to make it different to catch because I noticed it's easy to miss those when you get busy doing approaches and you're descending. So the new stuff has altitude alert. The old stuff, if you don't have it, your autopilot will go through it, and you could miss it, make a report. So this is it in a nutshell. There is one other issue that I will say on alternators, so I can just touch on the alternator issues we've been having. We had the old alternators, and they both physically broke because the back of the alternators held on by two number 10s on the housing, and the big bolt that goes through it is attached to that.
David is speaking of National Air Parts alternators, not Prestolite.
Right. So we put in two Prestolites.
No, you put in two.
Two plane powers. And this is a long, long story. I'm going to make it short because it's still not done yet. We put one in, flashed it. It would come online fine. And then after a few flights, it would take a little more RPM to come online. And then after a while, it would never come online unless it was flashed. So it's like the permanent magnet wasn't working. The plane power does not have an aux terminal to come out to go to your voltage regulator. So we got the Aerostar mod where it puts voltage onto your bus side or field side as you crank the engines coming off coming off the starter. And it worked. Then our other alternator broke. So we put another plain power in, and it came up online, but it won't come online without the exciter circuit. The problem with the exciter circuit is it works great when you're starting it, but if for some reason you lose your alternator in flight, you cannot get it back online. So
Can you put us in, and talk to Arts about this? If you change the regulators over the plain power regulators and wiring for the instructions, it works the way it's supposed to work. You can shut an alternator off and turn it back on. The problem is that the regulators are not certified for our airplanes, so we have to get field approval. And I don't know anybody that's done the field approval yet. Or you have?
we're putting them in right now and getting the field approval, but they do the same thing as the old ones.
Yeah, we did it, we wired it the way as per the directions from Hartsville, and we didn't have any problems. We could turn the alternator off, get the flight, turn it back on, and right back on.
Yeah.
I can do the same thing and it doesn't, I wired it just like they said, unless there's something I'm missing.
Let me interrupt this just for a minute. There are multiple configurations of alternator connectivity. And with that said, Jimmy, you must have been working on a later than 77 model airplane. Okay. The success I had was on George's airplane. It's an 84 model 700P. The problem with the plain power alternator is it is not self-exciting. And right. David is flying a 1976 model airplane. The difference is my 77 model and later airplanes have an annunciator panel in the sun shield. Okay. Before that, in 75 or 76 and older airplanes, they had just a annunciator light in the instrument panel and a box of 2 relays over near the pilot's left foot, above the pilot's left foot. And that interface does not allow for it does not have the auxiliary wire running out to the alternator. So what's going to happen, those model airplanes, what you did is fine. You've got it solved. But in the earlier model airplanes, you don't have the ability to excite the alternator after you've turned it off. To get it to work properly, he's going to have to add an additional circuit that he and I have talked about.
Why can't you put the flash circuit in that's in some of the later model airplanes? I have a 1980 airplane we work on, and as soon as you start the engine, you got to turn the switch and flash the alternator and get it to come online.
And
That's exactly what he's going to do.
And that's what we're looking at doing. What we couldn't do on, like yours, we couldn't keep a power line on the bus side because that's where our alternator fail light comes off of, and our alternator could fail, and we'd never know it. Unlike the later ones that have an aux wire that go to the plain power that puts on a light. So our circuitry is on that line and it has to lose that power. And if we're feeding it all the time, it will never do it. So yeah, that's what we're looking at doing actually. And the plain power regulators, it's I would say semi-approved because their instructions on their PMA part.
I read that. The red part about the instruction sheet on page 105, it says if you're doing multi-engine installation, you need to use their regulators. But I called them and they said the regulators are not approved for our.
No, exactly, but they are a PMA regulator. And our regulator is on their instruction sheet. It's a little bit of a gray area. I'm not saying which way to do it. You know, when you say, hey, it's a PMA part, and hey, they're saying taking off my part on that, and I'm using their alternators. I mean, and it wouldn't be a problem just to go to the FAA and get a field approval on that. But we got to get ours working right first. So it's always challenges we're coming up with on electrical, avionics wise. And So I would say if anybody has any questions, let me look at one other. G3X, here's a picture of a nice G3X. It's in the 210. I'm not sure if they're STC for the Aerostar. I don't think they are, but it's kind of like a G500, but it's pretty clean setup.
Built-in autopilot.
Yeah, this one has a G500, GFC 500.
That's what's in the Speedstar.
Oh, the GFC 500?
No,
600.
yeah, the G3X.
Oh, G3X, yeah.
And the autopilot.
Right. Oh, did that one. And so here is when you're doing an engine monitor, one thing nice about engine monitor especially on a twin, the Aerostar is running up all these 16th inch lines all the way up to the cockpit for fuel pressure, oil pressure, and all that. You pull all that stuff out, saves a lot of weight. This is just pictures of oil pressure, maybe oil temperature. I don't think that's oil temperature. Pressure, maybe fuel pressure. And this goes to a box, and then it all sends it up to the cockpit. So depending on where it is, these are some of the hoses, and we just got to the end of the line and hooked it up. And then, of course, you tie them up out of the way. So that saves a lot of, yeah. And so there's our little Garmin 110 box that's in the wing root leading edge, where all the sensor wire goes here, and this goes up to the cockpit. So you don't have all that wire going up all the way forward. A lot of stuff cleans it up, makes it nice. They talk to each other, they cross. So this one talks to the other engine, and then they cross over to the screens, and if one fails, it gives you an update.
And this is George's 700P, and the reason they put it in this location is because the intercooler is on the top of the engine rear on 700P.
Yeah. So they are made to also be in the engine compartment. They're supposed to handle that temperature. Yeah. Any questions, comments? Yes.
Yeah, I have 3 questions. The first one is on the G275.
Yeah.
You replaced the mechanical flight director and the HSI with those. What's involved in that installation? Is that a direct replacement, or is it a complicated undertaking? The second question I had was, when you do that, you have to do the pressure pump adjustment that you were speaking of earlier. And the third question was, if you have a KFC 225, is that process the same, or is it different?
So the question is, how complicated are GI 275s to install, and if it's connected to a KFC 225. So there's wiring to it, right? So it depends on your radio. If you have a 750 or whatever you have, that wants to talk to the KI 275s through data buses, RS-232, 429, makes it a little easier than the old style. Yeah, physically it'll fit in those holes, but you gotta open it up quite a bit to run the new wires. It cleans up your pitot-static, really, because you can get rid of some of your other instruments if you wanted to. And then run into your autopilot. If anybody got that sheet with the 275s on it, what's it say for the KFC 225? Or is it even on there?
That's good. Native GPSS for the KFC 225.
Does it do gyros?
Yeah.
So if it does a gyro or HSI, that's great. You can get rid of both of those. You don't have to move it over. And you just got rid of a lot of your autopilot headaches for the mechanical gyro. But yes, it has to be wired to it. And basically you can get rid of all your switches that says nav 1, nav 2, GPS, because whatever's on your HSI is going to go to the autopilot. So if you got your GPS there or GPSS steering, it's going to the autopilot. If you switch to VOR, it's going to the autopilot. I kind of like that. It keeps it simple. The less buttons I have to push. And yeah, if you got rid of your 2 gyros, you do have to, take that vac or pressure system that Aerostars are and vent it overboard so that you can at least, if you have boots. If you don't have boots, you can get rid of all your vacuum stuff.
That's a major surgery, right? That's not going to
Say that again?
So that's a major surgery to make that swap those 2 mechanical gates.
Yeah, you're not going to do it in one day. Yeah, it's a bigger, yeah. And then I'm going to say 20% of the installs are programming, and make sure you get your avionics shop to program it correctly to what you have, because it's just become a big problem sometimes, and it's a big issue to get your systems talking to the right computer the right way at the right time. And it's young kids love it. It's programming. The old guys, they don't like it so much, and so that's where we're at. And your third one was?
25, which you answered that, right? The process is the same.
Oh, yeah. So it's probably the least expensive way to get rid of some mechanical gyros on your airplane if it talks completely to your autopilot. Probably the least expensive on a GI 275s rather than a 500 TXI or something. Big screen. Yep. Yeah, that's true. I haven't done an Aspen, or we work on some of them, but I haven't installed one. But the Aspens do emulate more than the 275, and so they will do a Century 4. Right. Sure. Yeah, Aspen's another way, and you can just take things that I said about the GI 275, add it to Aspens, and they do emulate the Century 4. And I think I saw an airplane with that in here. Maybe I didn't. Oh, around. Any other questions, comments? Yes, sir.
We're flying a little 600 this week. We've got an Aspen, an AFC 200. Do we have a remote DG or a gyro up in the nose that interfaces with the display on the Aspen? The reason why I'm asking is we're flying along and just not constantly, but the airplane gives a little hiccup. Nothing radical, just annoying. Just enough to wake you up and kind of nod and off a little bit. There's a little hiccup, and I don't know if the command bars, they're trying to catch the command bars or vice versa, but it just goes hiccup, and about 3-4 minutes later, maybe hiccup again, just enough to wake you up.
I would have to say that it's connected to the Aspen, but it could be wired differently, and whether it has its own gyro or uses the Aspen. You're an Aspen guy, right?
Yeah, the Aspen, one of the things we look at is either the breaker or the ECU, their analog control unit, the other version for an EA100. Is it EA100? EA100. It's a little box about this big, it's up to the Avionics thing. You got that, they've got the Aspen wired, emulated analog. So, I had the same issue, but it's not, mine is the last part of the every part of it still doesn't function. And I'm so ready to have Century 4 out. Maybe you got a Century 4 out
We changed out the ADI altogether, because my tech said that it could be just at this point that ADI is just, he saw a little bit of twitchiness in it when we were doing the test flight. So we threw that into it, it's still doing it. The odd thing for us with inside this thing is that it'll continue this PIO, and it's almost like it's an old tube issue, because after about 45 minutes of running it, you're chasing the problem, it goes dead level, it's perfect. And every time I take it back to the tech, it flies beautifully. But it's just this on and off stuff that has been driving us wild.
We were 3 hours and 10 minutes from Panama City to here, and it does it every couple of minutes.
Yeah, we just,
It's getting annoying as hell.
it drives you wild. It's about 30 minutes, 35 minutes. It's just this constant little flip. And she's going to make sure you jump sooner than it jumps. And she sees it coming out.
What they're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's,
But this has been an ongoing problem, and I'm just told that there are so few of these pitchboards left with this KFC 200 that and there are people rebuilding them, and we've got a stock. I'm out at Sarasota with Sarasota Avionics. He must have 7 or 8 of them on the shelf that he promises to rebuild. Jimmy's probably, he's still got 2 of Jimmy's.
Yeah, but Jimmy, you know the airplane.
Yeah.
BB.
Yeah, so that's where we're working at. So I do this a lot. I know that's,
I just changed the computer and my airplane, after you start getting warm up, maybe half hour, 40 minutes ago.
yeah.
I just shut the afternoon roll off and then I put a rack, I just stuck it, put them out,
Talk about the ages, you guys are all facing the same thing.
yeah, it's older autopilots, and if I can recap, basically it depends on how your airplane's wired, whether the Aspen's running it or the old gyros. And I can tell you, like on some of the old Centuries with the round plugs, if you take your airplane to Autopilot Center has a lot of experience, they're almost going to say, first thing we're going to do is change all these plugs, and that's kind of what we do. Right. Yeah, because, well, that could be too. Well, I go in there and I talk to the guys, and they're ready to retire, or they have, but they're wealth of knowledge. And yes, they replace those sockets get wore out. We did it on ours when we got the airplane. The glide slope didn't work. It was the plug. So almost just go in there, let's just change all those plugs if they're the old style. And same with S-Tech. I've talked to those guys on some of those S-Tech computers. The one guy, I think his name's Ralph or Chant, and he works at home, but he has everything memorized. If you get a hold of the guy, they'll help on that. And we had an old Cessna 400 autopilot that would pitch down dramatically, and we had the box, I think, sent in. We took it. One thing good about Tulsa, you can just about take stuff anywhere you want to, get it fixed up pretty quick. Autopilot Central, because they worked on it. I think it took them 4 tries, and probably what they eventually found was a loose solder on the board that, at the worst possible time, the solder would move and it would pitch down. And, the Century 4s, those things, if you want them calibrated right, you have to do it in flight. And you're either upside down on the panel or you got a grout harness. And it's hard to beat the new digital. You can ask George on his KFC 225, the new Bendix King, the new Garmin's. They're pretty amazing. And so any other questions, comments? I'm going to have to say, everybody who spoke here this morning, wealth of knowledge. What a nice treat, really.
One of the other things I want to say about David, he's helped me many, many times. He troubleshoots our pitot-static system and finds cracks and fittings, and it's unbelievable. We've got, he'll come over to test an airplane I'm working on and do a pitot-static test on it, and he'll find leaks. They're not big leaks, but they're leaks. And he'll track them down to the fitting and wheel well or a hose that's needs to be replaced that's older than I am. And that's old. Come to think of it.
Ken, is that the fella that when I stopped in here?
Yeah, that's David.
Did GPS for me?
Yep, the 430.
And you know what? He did an excellent job because I just got a visual 12 miles and
That's his out of sight warranty.
That's what happens when you're on the ramp and you ask for help.
I stuck $20 in it. We wouldn't take any money. I stuck $20 in, so I got my $20.
All right, well, thanks, Ken.
Thanks, David. Appreciate you. I guess next on the agenda is, before our lunch, is to have a annual meeting.